Thank you very much. First, Philippe, Rosaria, for inviting me to this keynote, because to be honest, I've been doing research for 15 years, something like this, and lately I am specializing in data spaces, so I feel this conference is representing who I am, at least professionally, so very happy to be here. Having said so, that's the title for the keynote, right? A very short title and concise. So, summarizing, what's next? So, if I want to tell you what I think is next, first, we should define where we are, right? So, when I was thinking about what I am going to present here, I was saying, okay, whenever I look for an assessment or where we are in terms of technology, we usually go to these Gartner reports or these kind of things where we see everything happening, right? So I was putting my suit and my tie, and I was saying, okay, if I were to issue a Gartner report on data spaces, I would basically provide these two figures. The one on the left-hand side is measuring the investment versus the profit of something. So we start investing. If you listen to Rolf this morning, we were investing in data spaces since Horizon 2020, now in Horizon Europe, now in Digital Europe. But at some point, we have to break even and start being self-sustainable and producing money out of data spaces. So that's one important thing to have in mind. The other one is this curve of every technology is looping through the inflated expectations of what it will be, then disillusionment, and then finally going into the plateau of making it something endurable. So for data spaces, if we go to the first figure, we are here. So we keep investing, but we need to somehow start commercializing data spaces. So we are in what they call the valley of death. So good. If we go to the other figure, we have been talking about data spaces for 5, 6, 7 years. So now we are turning into the inflated expectations, and we are in what they call the throat of disillusionment. So not very nice places to stay, right? So this is the choice we have to make. So either we stay and we become a walking dead, or we move forward. And some are saying even that we can be the new internet if we do it right. Good news, it's up to us. So it is dependent on what we are doing in research, it is dependent on what we are doing industrializing data spaces, but it is up to us. So let's see how can we stay out of these zones and really break even and doing something profitable for this. Okay, so we know where we are. So what I see, that's my very personal opinion of what we already did. And we saw partially this on these presentations we were having today. So starting left to right, we've been doing data lakes, data platforms, data ingestion engines, everything around gathering data for 10 years, 20 years. So the technology for data persistence and data sharing is out there. This is not the missing part. The technology is there. Then, for a few years now, we've been discussing a lot of regulatory push from the European Commission, from the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, this idea of the digital single market, the AI Act. So there is a lot of regulatory push into data spaces to make them happen. Then we started identifying reference architecture. We just saw several times the IDSA reference architecture, the Gaia-X reference architecture, requirements, use cases, specifications. And now we are starting the phase where we are seeing sectorial data spaces. So we are talking about the health data space, we are talking about the mobility data space, Catena X4, logistics. So there are a lot of data spaces popping up. So this is what the path we've been following. So for me, what's next? So we need 3 things. First thing, if we are doing sectorial data spaces, we need to keep in mind that the final goal is the digital single market. Therefore, we need interoperability between those data spaces, because at the end of the day, if we are doing something in the mobility data space and another thing for the health data space, whenever we want to do cross collaboration, we won't be able to do so. So first thing, interoperability. Second thing, we need standards, because interoperability is usually guaranteed through the use of standards. We were mentioning several protocols during the day, but it is not enough with protocols. We need standard protocols, because otherwise it is difficult to have a dominant, let's say, landscape of protocols so that we can all be using at least partially the same stack. And finally, we need adoption. And the adoption is usually granted by a combination of open standards and open source. And that is why we are here as at the Eclipse Foundation. So this is the first time I would mention these three pillars: interoperability, standardization, open source. So you will see that I will get back to this several times. So how do we do usually these kind of things at the Eclipse Foundation? So you know we are very well known for projects such as the Eclipse Dataspace Connector. Those projects are self-sovereign, and it is the result of several people, several companies working together on a given idea, but they are doing just one thing. But we do another thing that you might not be very familiar with, and I invite you to visit the industry collaboration booth that is on the main OCX hall, which is precisely this, industry collaborations. When are we doing industry collaborations? When we sense something on the community, these drivers. There is a market pool, so the market is demanding something concrete. There is a hot research topic, such as this kind of thing, so a lot of people are working in the research area for data spaces. There is a technology push, a lot of people developing technology, or there is a regulation. So as you can see, for data spaces, there is a combination of multiple things. Whenever we sense this, we try to set up this kind of industry collaborations, and we do two things, very concrete, actionable things. So we are pragmatic guys. Standardize, so trying to see what is the minimum stack of protocols we need to standardize them, and foster adoption. So we group everybody who is working in the Eclipse open source projects together, and we tell them, okay, that's the way we see this moving forward. Are you willing to adopt our standards? Hopefully yes. So then we standardize and they adopt. So that's the usual way we do it. So, but what's the problem with data spaces? We saw it several times today. I like analogies, so I will use a food analogy. For me, the data space landscape is extremely complex. So whenever I guess you felt this at some point. When you are entering data spaces, you were supposed, that's very simple. I will use this, and that's enough. But you go and you see hundreds of pages of documents from IDSA, another hundreds of pages of documents from GaiaX, and when you finish reading them all, you say, how to start? I don't know. And then you go, there is an Eclipse Dataspace components, there is this firewall connector, there is this new thing GaiaX is doing. How I am going to do something out of everything? So how can I start? So there are multiple things we can pour on a melting pot, but at the end of the day we need to extract something eatable. So we need to construct something which makes sense out of this mess of references and technologies and everything, that it is partially addressing a particular need, but it is not addressing the complete need of a given use case. And you will see that, as I was saying, we need to make this having in mind that we need to foster interoperability through the use of standards and open source. If we do it right, we will come up with something like spaghetti with meatballs, right? We are combining ingredients and everybody likes it. So that's not a problem.
I don't
but,
like that.
But if we do it the wrong way, we might end up having something like this, which is really a dish you can eat in Ireland. I don't know if we have Irish colleagues. I was Googling weird dishes, and this pop up. It is called Stargaze cake, and it is made of egg, potato, and full fishes. So you will put the fish, everything together. So eggs are fine, potatoes are fine, fishes are fine, but if you combine it this way, maybe your audience is not very broad. So, going back to the first picture, so how are we trying to map everything we were saying as drivers, as concrete actionable points for data spaces at Eclipse? I am not trying to neglect that there is a research push, a technology push, a market need, but there is a clear regulatory push for data spaces, which is the Data Act. If you go to the Data Act, Chapter 8, Articles 33 and 36, they are saying you need interoperability for the digital single market, and data spaces is the way to do this. So they are quoting data spaces. So the European Commission is saying we need data spaces for the digital single market, and that's the way you should do it. So we were trying to transpose these very high level requirements into something actionable, which is these two things, as we were saying. Specification. So we are trying to provide the minimum set of standards that we need for data spaces to be interoperable. And then we are trying to build the data spaces community. There are several data spaces projects, as you can see. These are just examples. And there is a community of companies working on the Eclipse Data Spaces Working Group, trying to foster the adoption of those standards into real data space open source projects. At the end of the day, if we manage to have these standards, we will have what we call the TCK, which is a technology compatibility kit, which is allowing whoever is willing to certify that they are compliant with those standards to do so in an open way, and they will publish the results and they can claim that they are compatible with these standards. If we go to the lower part, the actionable item we will get out of the adoption part would be a starter kit saying, if you want to do data spaces, you can use this, and this open source module in order to start. Then you can customize them, but this is the minimum set of things you need to start, and they are compliant with this set of protocols. So that's the thing we are trying to do. So looking at this stack, so as you may know, the Eclipse Foundation is what ISO and IAC call a PAS submitter, publicly available specification submitter, which means that they acknowledge that the way we do specification is the right way, and therefore we can fast-track standards. So this is what we are trying to do with these standards. And we came up with this stack approach for standards, starting bottom-up. The base protocol. So as you can see, catalog, contract, transfer, we were seeing just in the previous presentation, that's the Dataspace protocol. The Eclipse Dataspace protocol is therefore a base protocol, which is ruling the way we are accessing and publishing the catalog, we are clearing contracts, we are doing the data transfer, the signaling part, the control part. Then there is a layer for transport protocols. As you know, there is no standardized way of transferring, so we keep this open. Whoever is willing to transfer, they can do it through RESTful APIs, or they can do it through MQTT, or whatever transport protocol they select. Then if we go one layer above, we are trying to standardize a claims protocol, meaning that we need a standardized way to issue verifiable credentials, both for identity, but also for the description of our data sets, our services, whatever. So we will specify what's the best way to do so, both for the issuance of those claims and for the message protocol that you need to exchange it on a data space. And then another very important part is the profiles. So in a sense, the claims protocol and the base protocol are the protocols that are saying the message format that we should follow, while the profiles are specifying what's inside those messages. And this is very linked with what we know in the data space ecosystem as trust frameworks. So you can expect one profile for the Gaia X trust framework, which is specifically oriented for Europe, with policies that are aligned with GDPR, with our intention in Europe to keep sovereignty, with some formats, with some semantics, but nothing is preventing Japan or the States or anybody in other regions to do other profiles that are less or more restrictive. The important thing now is to make sure that if you are using one profile and you are interested in joining a data space which is using another profile to see if the rules are matching or not, so that you can agree or disagree and participate or not participate depending on what you see these guys are trying to enforce as policies. So this is the minimum set of protocols, but what is the way, the other way, we can transpose it into something actionable, because those are protocols, not open source specifications. So we need several layers in between. So what's the layer which is somehow aggregating what we are doing with the Dataspace protocol, with the decentralized claims protocol, that is the one we are trying to specify? Connectors. So at the end of the day, we need connectors that are implementing these two protocols. One base protocol, one claims protocol. And, for instance, we are working with the Eclipse Dataspace components guys, and they agreed in the next release to incorporate these two specifications, meaning that in release, I don't know what's the number for EDC, coming in late 2024, you will have direct compatibility with these two protocols on the next release. So that's good. Then we have profiles. So what are we missing on top? As we were saying, the trust frameworks. We will select a trust framework which is using one or other profile. We started with these two ones, which are matching the Gaia X trust framework and the ICER trust framework, but we can have as many as we like. And then finally, we can implement some other additional features on the data space. We can have marketplaces, observability, connector as a service, so you name it. But at the end of the day, you need a connector, you need a trust framework, and you need whatever else you think is needed for your users in the data space. And finally, whenever everything is complete, we can provide as well certification, as we were saying with DTCK. If you are willing to certify that your connector is compatible with these protocols, if you want to certify that your trust framework is compatible with these profiles, you will have the means to do so. So, but why do we need those standards? And this is an analogy, yet another analogy, that I took from Gianfranco Cecconi. You might know him. He's the executive director of the Dataspace Support Center at IDSA, and he introduced this very nice analogy of what is the comparing data spaces with tennis. So at the end of the day, everybody knows the rules of tennis. So you have to serve, you have to put it on the other side of the court, and whenever you score a point, it starts at 15, then 30, then 40, and then you have a point. There are sets that are made up of 6 points. So everybody knows the rules. So regardless if you are in Australia or Spain, you will know how to play tennis. Then for the claims, so there is a ranking which is worldwide, which is identifying players and saying this is a good player because he won or she won several tournaments, and therefore he is ranking 1 or 3 or 4 in the list. So there is a way to identify players. Then we have profiles. So if you go to Wimbledon, you have to know that you have to wear white and that there is a given fee for participating and there is a given prize if you win. But in other tournaments, there are different rules. So depending on which tournament you are participating, you might be interested in joining or not, because there are certain rules that are applicable just to those tournaments. And at the end of the day, the participants are free to choose. If I want to be in that club because it is matching my expectations, I can do it. But if I am not, that's fine. So at the end of the day, there is a system which is making everybody who is willing to participate and to know how to participate. So, going back to the goals, this is what we are trying to do as part of the Dataspace working group at Eclipse. And these are our short-term goals, meaning what we will do in 2025. We will try to provide the roadmap for standardization for all the protocols in the stack I was showing before. We will start the transposition. So we are now doing the specification, but in 2025 we will start the transposition, meaning that by the end of 2025, we might have at least 1 or 2 international standards that are coming out of these specification projects. Then we will start on adoption, so that's the other side, as we were saying. So once we have these standards, we will push open source modules to incorporate those standards so they are compliant, and trying to build the community. And again, as I said, I think it is the third time, we are spinning around these 3 ideas: interoperability, standardization, implementation, and adoption. So just for you to know, the Eclipse Dataspace Working Group, this is what we did in 2024 in numbers. So as you can see, there are several projects already contributing, there are several partners already contributing, and we are participating in events, we are trying to build the community. So just for you to know, follow up, the community is free. So you just have to register for our community calls, and the mailing list are open, so you can see what we are doing on this idea of openness and transparency. If you want to participate more in depth, you can reach out to me and I will let you know how to do it. So, trying to reach the end of the presentation. If you agree that we need to work on technical standards, if you agree that the open source adoption is the way forward to make it happen, if you think that there is a benefit on having this data space community and collaboration is the only way forward, then what we do in Eclipse for data spaces is interesting for you, so follow us. Just an idea of who is working on the data spaces working group. As you can see, very relevant players. We have all the associations that are spearheading, let's say, specification, standardization in data spaces, together with some very active industrial players. So we have this right combination of who is able to provide us with requirement specification, so on, and also the ones that are able to implement and adopt it. One thing, if you are staying tomorrow, I am having a more in-depth presentation in Breakthrough 2 about standardization. So what is the way we do standardization in Eclipse? I just provided a few ideas here. And I will go into more details into each and every protocol that we are trying to standardize as part of the data spaces working group. And last slide, I promise. So we are now in the position that the technical problem is solved, and linking to the first figures, it's now the time to adopt and try to make benefit out of it. And again, final message, 3 pillars: interoperability, standardization, open source. Thank you very much.
Questions? No questions.
Yeah.
So the DCP will be included at the end of the year in the EDC, correct?
DCP, Decentralized Claims Protocol.
Yeah.
That's the idea. We have the commitment from the
Committers.
EDC to make it happen. So what we need first is to finalize the specification. Once it is finalized, they will include it in the next release, whenever it is.
Okay.
Hopefully by, maybe not by the end of this year, but coming soon.
If I'm not wrong, in one of your slides you mentioned something in the end about certification.
Yes.
So what about this? What are the thoughts on this? I know
Yes.
that, for example, IDSA already have set up some
Good.
standardization groups with this SQS.
It's a good thing that we have IDSA on the working group as well. For this.
So
No, but the idea, at the end of the day, I can discuss this in more detail during the break if needed. What we do as part of the Eclipse Data Spaces working group, or every working group in Eclipse, once we specify, we will have this open specification and hopefully the transposition as an ISO IEC or Sensenelec standard. So there are standards, and those standards will be tied to a TCK, which is a technology compatibility kit. You can run and publish the results and claim that you are compatible. So we have what we call the branding and compatibility program in the working group. So if whoever is willing to join the working group can do so as a participant or strategic member, and in this position, you would be able to certify your solution with whichever protocol you need. If it is just a connector, with these 2 ones. If it is a complete framework, you can certify for each and every protocol we are having. So you will have a badge saying you are Dataspace protocol, decentralized claims protocol, and conformity assessment profile, for instance. And you will have this stamp and saying you are
So
compatible.
it's connected with what IDSA did, it's not...
It is disconnected, but it is the way we see it moving forward. So this will be linked as well with IDSA certification, so you will have both at once, because as you know, IDSA is the project lead for the Eclipse Dataspace protocol. So at the end of the day, if you are certified on the Eclipse Dataspace protocol, by default, you are certified as IDSA.
Thank you so much, Javier, and
Welcome. Thank you.
good for you as well. Thank you again.
Cool.